Oh, now you want it to be illegal if we use the wrong pronouns?
Calling me a man over and over again. I feel like that should be illegal. I don't know.
Oh, I imagine the lawyers would like this. There'd be a whole lot of lawsuits. We're going to get into that story. This Dylan Mulvaney has a new deal, by the way. Maybe it's Maybelline, maybe it's a man. Plus, there's a method to their madness. Those climate activists, they say it's all for a good reason. We're going to explore that. Plus, the military's going green? Really? This is where we're heading? Yes, according to our energy secretary, who really doesn't know a whole lot about energy, the military's going green.
Do you support the military adopting that EV fleet by 2030?
I do, and I think we can get there as well.
Is this part of the whole ESG craze? And speaking of ESG, lots of questions still swirling right now around Tucker Carlson's departure there at Fox. Did ESG investors play a role in this? Or was it just as simple as the Murdochs really didn't like what they saw in his text messages? And as Biden warns conservatives are dangerous for America, listen to what Donald Trump has to say.
I will be retiring the name Crooked from Hillary Clinton so that we can use the name for Joe Biden, because he'll be known from now on as Crooked Joe Biden.
Coming up on today's program, we have Donald Trump's son, none other than Eric Trump, who's going to weigh in on the 2024 race and tell us why he thinks his dad is best positioned to be the next president of the United States. It would certainly make history now, would it not? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. I am Trish Regan. This is the Trish Regan Show. We're brought to you in part by LegacyPMInvestments.com. Okay, I'm just going to try and hope that that was just some sort of poor excuse for a nonsense video. Because you realize the kind of trouble we'd all be in. I mean, half the time you can't even keep it straight. I keep making the point that they is not even grammatically correct. I mean, they doesn't even make any sense. I was trying to read a story about a they that got married, and it was like it was in the New York Times, by the way, and I couldn't even follow it, right? Because it didn't make any sense. Could they not have picked they, by the way? I don't know, like a whole new word or something. It's very, very confusing. The idea that somehow you think it might be okay to go and like sue people for this. What's the plan? Like you're going to fine them? You're going to put them in jail because they misgendered you? I don't think so.
Lock them up.
But, this is part of this woke craze right now, which is taking over the country in a really, really nutty way. It's a totally nutty way. I mean, now apparently Dylan Mulvaney is who we need to consult for makeup advice. Check this out. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. That was the expression, right? That we used to hear for years on TV. But now it's maybe it's Maybelline. Maybe it's a man. I'm sorry, but this is nuts. All right. This is really, really nuts. Now, I will say, heck, if this darn makeup company can turn a man into looking like a woman, then, hey, maybe they got a reason for selling their stuff. But, it's just preposterous. Like that is just the reality of it. Again, maybe Maybelline is trying to make themselves more hip. I don't know. I was talking actually to one of the team members on the show who's quite young, who just told me he had never heard of this stuff.
Preposterous.
But maybe that's because he doesn't wear makeup. Maybe it's because he's a he. Anyway, I've used Maybelline products actually for years. I use their eyeliner. I have it on today, but I think I may have to revisit that whole Maybelline thing. By the way, where are women? Where are women on all this? I mean, the Nike sports bra thing I thought was pretty offensive. You see all the guys out there, they're up in arms about the whole Bud Light thing. Bud Light's really getting hit hard. Sales just keep falling. And yet women don't seem to be too worked up about this. I don't really understand that, because especially when you think about how this whole movement is trying to replace women, certainly on the athletic fields, right? You got a whole new record you got to beat in swimming these days, or in a track race. But how are women really supposed to compete with that? I mean, again, women deserve access to all of these education scholarships. And if this thing continues, meaning that, everybody just is treated equally because everybody's a they, then you're not going to have the same opportunities for women. So I just say this as somebody who cares about women, who cares about young women, about girls. I want to make sure that they get access to all the opportunities that they should, and it shouldn't be taken away by a guy. I mean, think about the oxymoron. We played you the other day the clip from Leah Thomas saying that it was feminists that were transphobic. I mean, think about where we are in society right now, where somehow the feminists, which, by the way, the left used to embrace and kind of, if you ask me, corrupted the term of feminism. They said, feminism is great. And yet simultaneously, now Leah Thomas says it's the feminists that are bad because they're the ones that are transphobic. I mean, this logic is getting increasingly difficult to follow. Meanwhile, our government has a brand new idea. Why not just make the military green?
Splendid idea.
Then we'll really win all the wars.
Do you support the military adopting that EV fleet by 2030?
I do, and I think we can get there as well. And I do think that reducing our reliance on the volatility of globally traded fossil fuels, where we know that global events such as the war in Ukraine can jack up prices for people back home, it does not contribute to energy security. I think energy security is achieved when we have homegrown clean energy that is abundant, like you see in Iowa. We think that we can be a leader globally in how we have become energy independent.
Oh yeah, that's like really gonna fly. I mean, look, I don't have a problem with them trying things and experimenting with things. I'm a big believer in we need all the energy sources we can get. Let's not kid ourselves. You want to go energy independent? Then okay. Go for it. By the way, don't make our lives miserable in the process. Make sure that everybody sort of has a way to access cheap energy in the interim. We shouldn't make everybody's life miserable unless, in fact, that is exactly what they want to do. Consider this. There was a big shutdown of a major highway in DC this week, and one of the activists behind it said, this is what it's about, making people's lives difficult. Really? I mean, you think that's the answer? You're just going to make everybody's life difficult now, okay, so that maybe it gets better in the future. I got news for you. Hey, look what happened when our economy shut down in March 2020. We gave birth to a whole new industry of people working from home, of using Zoom, for example. That would not have occurred had we not been sort of up against it. When the chips are down, Americans rally. So I can tell you today, like if we suddenly lost oil and there was no source of oil in the world whatsoever, I guarantee you Americans would make the switch to green energy like that. Yes, I think it's worth planning for, but you cannot turn off energy as we know it and expect that people are going to be okay with that. I mean, you're going to have massive economic hardship. We've already seen it. Certainly with inflation, you've got energy prices creeping up again. Eric Trump is going to weigh in on this because the economy is a big part of what he talks about. It's a big part of what I talk about. But before we do that, I want you to see right here our energy secretary being asked maybe about a year and a half ago by a friend of mine that I used to work with Bloomberg at about what her plan was for energy independence in America. Watch.
What is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America?
Oh my God. That is hilarious. Would that I had the magic wand on this. As you know, of course, oil is a global market. It is controlled by a cartel. That cartel is called OPEC, and they made a decision yesterday that they were not going to increase beyond what they were already planning. So, the interesting thing is, the Department of Energy has an energy information agency, and that agency does the forecasting of what oil and gas prices are going to be.
It tells you everything you need to know. In other words, folks, there is no plan. The only plan they can come up with is, okay, maybe let's try this green thing for our military, which, let's be honest, you can do a little experimental stuff. That's fine. But let's make sure that our military is equipped with all of the things that our military should need, right? This is like very important. We need to make sure that our military has the best access to everything. And you don't want to be like stranded in the middle of who knows where, because you can't get a charging station for your Humvee. I mean, this is, fine, go for it. Do some experiments, but do not make the military dependent on any kind of technology that is not ready. Don't make the American people dependent on that kind of technology. This idea that, people can just go out and buy an EV for $60K. People don't have that. And there's this total lack of realization of what life is actually like. I mean, I get it. You live in your ivory tower. You get to give fancy speeches for lots of money. You get to work at the federal government. You have no idea the challenges that everyday Americans are really facing. And a lot of those challenges are coming, frankly, from very, very bad economic policy, including energy policy. And yet Jennifer Granholm just wants to double down on it. And she's got all the activists that want to shut down highways out there in DC to go along with it. Because yes, let's make people's lives difficult. Another component, and we talk about this a lot, another component to it all is what's called environmental social governance. And that is where a lot of big asset management firms on Wall Street will come in and say, okay, we're going to invest in you, but we're not going to invest in you. And it's because of environmental social governance. In other words, are you playing by the set of rules that we think you should play by? If you're not, then we're not going to buy your stock. And so this has had a big effect on a lot of companies. I mean, I was saying BlackRock has a stake in just about everything. That's the biggest ESG investor out there and happens to be the biggest asset manager as well. There was chatter, of course, did ESG investing have anything to do with Tucker Carlson's absence? I want to show you a meme. I want to show you this meme. This is great. One of you guys sent this to me. This is the new person that's going to take over for Tucker. How do you like that? Right? That person should be ESG compliant, right? That person should be woke enough. My gosh. I mean, I guess nobody cares about ratings or making any money. Did that have something to do with it? I doubt it. I mean, on the fringe, yes. I mean, I don't think Fox won any friends by having some of the stories that he reported on and others reported on being out there. All that said, I'm somewhat suspicious now that part of this really has to do with kind of a thread of thought that maybe they're in the management where they don't like Donald Trump and they need to get away from Trump. And so they want to try and have a different cast of characters that they can put forward, maybe to get back to some of that kind of old-fashioned conservatism that was popular maybe during the Romney-Bush times. Again, no inside knowledge. I don't really know. I'm just sort of grasping at straws here, trying to make heads or tails of why they're willing to see their ratings plummet. And by the way, these ratings have plummeted down 56% in the most recent numbers. It's really pretty startling. It's kind of like Bud Light, right? When you look at what Bud Light did to itself, and the sales numbers that just continue to plunge. It's a similar story over at Fox because you have a lot of people that were very invested in that 8 p.m. show. And they're like, no way, I don't want anything to do with it. When you look at Newsmax's ratings, my gosh, they're exploding, right? Every single night since this has happened, Newsmax, Eric Bolling over there at 8 p.m. is just really killing it. So it shows you that people are looking for something different. They're also looking, hopefully, for some other media sources, right? Which is why I'm here. I have my podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. I think that there's an opportunity there for people to still seek out viewpoints that are diverse. And as long as we can get through, and that's important, right? You want to make sure that we can all get through. Important to have that direct connection. As long as we can get through, I think that we can still have a pretty big influence, albeit a little bit more splintered, right, on society. The advantage Fox had was they were the only big conservative network. They were on every single day, and they had sort of a predictable lineup. And now people are saying, well, what is that lineup going to look like? And I think they're out there sampling, looking for new things and new people, because you want to have this sense that someone's there looking out for you. And there's a feeling right now that maybe that's not the case over at Fox. Turning to 2024, we continue to get new polls in showing that Americans don't really want Joe Biden to run for office. They think he's kind of getting up there in age. Well, a new report in Axios, it's a website, a political website, suggests that he's really up there in age to the point where he's not quite able to function the way you would expect a president of the United States to be able to function. In fact, according to this report, Biden is only functional 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. Well, that's a heck of a work schedule. In fact, his staff is only allowed to schedule things between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m.
So hard.
It's a short work day. And doesn't he live there too? Anyway, I just gotta say it's a little weird because, when you're president, you kind of have a hard job. It's why when you see these presidents, they go into office and they look one way and then they come out and they look a whole other way. And you can really see how they age. Actually, I think Donald Trump was spared that. He didn't look he kind of looked the same when he came out. And he also, by the way, would just work around the clock. But, Joe Biden's very disciplined, 10 to 4. That's the deal. Weekends off. So how the heck is he going to campaign? I mean, I'm just asking an honest question. If I were running his campaign, I'd be like, okay, so what are we doing? What are you going to do for the chicken dinner on Friday night? That all the donors are paying $50K a pop to go to. Can you go to the dinner? Can he make it up that late? Do we have to give him time off earlier in the day when he has that evening event? Can he travel to all these various places, manage the time zone changes, and actually get up and give a speech in a coherent way?
I need my afternoon nap.
Oh, well, nobody expects that of him, right? Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, Joe Biden giving a coherent speech, he's never been able to give one. I mean, now it's just that much worse because he's 80 years old. By the way, Donald Trump saying he's no longer calling him Sleepy Joe. He's got a whole new moniker, and he's actually taken that moniker from Hillary Clinton because he used to call her corrupt. And he's giving that to Joe. He's now actually bestowing the term beautiful on Hillary Clinton. So she is now beautiful Hillary Clinton, and it's corrupt Joe Biden, of course, according to Donald Trump. He gave this news when he was in New Hampshire just this week.
I will be retiring the name Crooked from Hillary Clinton and her moniker. And I'm going to give her a new name. I don't know, like maybe Lovely Hillary or Beautiful Hillary. But I'm going to retire the name Crooked so that we can use the name for Joe Biden, because he'll be known from now on as Crooked Joe Biden.
Anyway, look, it's going to be a crazy race all over again. 2024 is really going to be one for the history books. You got a president who was impeached twice, who, they're threatening with jail, who's got a zillion lawsuits against him. And yet he's coming back to run again. And right now he's way ahead in the Republican primary, suggesting that he is going to be the Republican nominee. So think about that. Think about how crazy this world is. And think about, what he is also up against, right? There's a whole machine that wants to destroy him and destroy any member of the media, let's be honest, that might actually say, gee, the guy's got a point. I was talking to Alan Dershowitz the other day. He's going to be on the show. He's out with a brand new book called Get Trump. Kind of funny name, right? I mean, it makes sense. Anyway, he was saying he's a civil libertarian. He actually might even still vote for Joe Biden, but he's just really disgusted at the destruction that they're trying to engage in terms of our Constitution, right? Because they're going after Trump with so many different lawsuits in so many different ways. And that really feels, to him anyway, as a constitutional sort of person, as somebody who's a legal scholar, very, very famous for all of his big cases that he's taken on, and somebody who believes in the legal system, he feels like that is sort of being destroyed. And politics aside, right? Because again, he thinks he's going to vote for Joe, though. He's not fully sure. We'll see. We're going to talk to him next week, so stay tuned for that. But today, I got a very big interview coming up. I want to get to Eric Trump, who's going to weigh in on all these things that we're seeing right now, including the military that somehow is going green. My home state, there in Manchester, New Hampshire, you saw the former president speaking. He's really digging into Joe Biden and some of the policies there. I'm so thrilled to welcome to the program for the first time. We've spoken on other occasions, Eric Trump, the son of former President Trump and the executive vice president of the Trump Organization. Hey, good to see you.
It's good to be on, Trish.
So, wow. Lots going on. Let's start first in New Hampshire and some of these rallies. We're seeing, again, a lot of enthusiasm. Your dad is way ahead in the polls. He's been pulling ahead in the polls, proving that I guess some of the legal stuff going on isn't quite panning out the way maybe some people had hoped. What do you feel right now in this stage in the game? Where do you think you are?
Listen, I feel like you have an entire country right now that misses Donald Trump. I can't get on a plane on any given day where I don't have 10 people come up to me and say, we miss your father. We absolutely love him. The country's going in terrible direction. I mean, there's no one knows the business world better than you, Trish. And look at every metric there is out there. Look at consumer confidence. Look at inflation, the price of everything. No one's talking about oil and gas right now, which is kind of surprising because oil and gas is starting to go through the roof again. And, I think people have been so kind of desensitized to high prices across everything. Look at the price of eggs. Look at the price of a 2x4 versus when my father was in there. Again, you're running in certain categories of goods. You've got, 15, 20, 30% inflation. Overall inflation is, high single digits. That really, really hurts. And by the way, that hurts the class of people that Biden pretends to care about the most, which is, kind of the lower and middle class, right? People who have less assets that otherwise kind of inflate in value with inflation. The people that are renting apartments, people who are living day to day, that hurts them substantially more than ever before. And frankly, inflation's outpacing wages in this country. So you've got that problem. You've got just the embarrassment of the national stage where you have China that's going around the world. They want to be literally the negotiators, the arbitrators of conflict around the world. Wasn't that always America's place? Wasn't that what people always looked to us to do, right? I mean, isn't that why the United Nations is always in New York? Yet President Xi is literally going out trying to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, you have wars breaking out all over the world. People don't respect us anymore. We're about to lose the U.S. currency. Biden spends more time worried about transgender bathrooms than he does, about all the problems.
So that's mind-boggling to me. I mean, you bring up so many good points, and I've been saying this forever on the show, like inflation. All of his policies have been so driven towards creating more inflation. And frankly, they didn't do a darn thing to kind of contain the energy situation. I remember when your dad bought oil for the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and it was like dirt cheap, and he filled it up. And the Democrats were so angry. They said this was a giveaway to oil companies. And I'm like, yeah, you needed that, didn't you? Because, Biden keeps draining the SPR whenever he can. Like we have major economic problems. We have major international problems. You made the point that he's focused on all these social issues, which frankly, I don't think are going to get them that far. You look at even Hillary Clinton, she got very criticized for this, but she said, hey, like this is not a winning issue. Parents aren't going to go for this. So why does he double down?
I have no idea. I mean, it's actually lunacy. I mean, some of the social issues that they're pushing relative to the issues at hand, which affect every single person, is crazy. I mean, yesterday with, again, wars about to break out all over the world, what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, what's happening between China and Taiwan and all that, he comes out and he announces that, congratulations, the U.S. military, we'd like them to be all electric. How do you run fighter jets on batteries? I guarantee you they don't go all that fast. How do you... where do you charge batteries in the middle of a desert? You have another, war in the Middle East. You're in the middle of Afghanistan, in some valley somewhere. Where do you plug in your Humvee or your tank to charge it? It's insane. I mean, it's truly, truly insane. And this is the crap that they're worried about right now. And while you have, again, an economy that's totally failing, while we're being disrespected all around the world, one of the things that's really kind of personal to me is what's happening to U.S. currency. If we lose the United States currency, that's it for this country. And you have 18 countries now, or 19 countries that are totally happy getting off. We're spending trillions of dollars. We're handing out money to everybody around the world while not actually taking care of ourselves. Our infrastructure's failing. We've just become an embarrassment. And that's what my father's running on. My father's it's not Democrat versus Republican. It's common sense. Let's restore the might of America. Let's restore respect for America. Let's restore common sense to society. And that's what he's fighting. And Trish, they're trying to take him down every single day. They've weaponized the entire system. They've weaponized every district attorney, every attorney general in every single state. They couldn't get them through the executive branch. We all saw that, right? It failed every single time. So guess what they try and do? They weaponize these Democratic lunatic, attorney generals and district attorneys who want to go back to 2006, where he paid an NDA to somebody who admitted, that same person admitted that the thing never actually happened. $130,000 NDA, but yet they'll spend $200 million shutting down New York to bring Donald Trump in. They'll shut down every intersection. They'll shut down the FDR Drive. They'll shut down, blocks and blocks around Trump Tower. They'll bring up 38,000 members of the NYPD. They'll bring them all into work over what? $100,000 NDA from 18 years ago? No one buys this nonsense anymore, but this is their playbook. This is how they play. This is how they try and disqualify Donald Trump, who's leading the polls by 35% over his nearest.
Yeah, no, it scares them. Eric, the Hunter Biden laptop, you remember that was like no-go territory. So many journalists, so many journalist organizations, including the New York Post, which had reported on it, really got hammered. And in fact, in some cases, other social media accounts taken offline. It's fascinating to me because there was a letter from all these, ex-CIA folks saying, oh, this was, totally Russian disinformation. This was the same crowd, of course, that said what we now know was disinformation, the dossier. They said that was real. And so I just question, when we go into 24 here, like, how difficult is that to navigate as a campaign for your dad when you've got the establishment saying, okay, this is true when it's actually false, and this is false when it's actually true?
Well, listen, I think the government's lost so much credibility. If I went back, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a guy who wears a tinfoil hat. Right. If I was to play this story back 6 years ago and I was to tell you all these things that were going to happen, that, the FBI and campaigns and Hillary Clinton were going to pay for a dossier that said that Trump was colluding with Russia, I'd never believe it. I'd say, give me a break. That, former CIA guys, 51 of them to be exact, were going to come out and, write a story that the Biden laptop, the Hunter Biden laptop, was disinformation when it has pictures of the guy with prostitutes doing illegal drugs, has emails from the guy's Gmail account or whatever the hell it was, to people all over the world extracting money. Trish, if I did 1/1000th of that, I would be in jail for the rest of my life. And the fact that they've been able to cover this up, the fact that he's lying on firearms forms, 44 77s, that he's not in possession of drugs. He's not doing drugs. If I did that, I'd be in jail under all of those statutes. But you know what? He gets a free pass. Right now, he's selling $500,000 finger painting, his finger painting art.
I know.
It's not that people in the U.S. are buying this crap. You know who's buying it? The Chinese and various people who want to otherwise have influence. And
it's wild stuff, and it's a tricky thing for you, for you and your siblings, because anything you do is going to be looked at through that prism of, oh, is he getting a special favor? But for some reason, I'm perplexed that they never look at the other side in the same way. Tucker Carlson out at Fox News. Your reaction?
Well, I think Tucker's a good man, and he had an amazing voice, and he really called things, I think, incredibly fairly, right? I mean, he wasn't partisan. There were things that, frankly, I disagreed with on his show, but it actually made you want to tune in. It made you want to tune in. He was great. He was a great voice for conservatives. He's got an amazing future. I never saw that one coming. In a million years, I never saw that coming. And I got to know Tucker very well, as you clearly did. And he's a great person. And I think his future is going to be incredibly bright. I think he's got an incredible audience. In a certain way, I think Fox maybe even empowered him to have a larger audience than he otherwise did, because it's crazy. The people who they try and suppress, the Joe Rogans of the world, the Donald Trumps of the world, the people that they try and beat into the ground, for some reason always come out kind of on top. And it's remarkable. There's a credibility that's gained as soon as the system kind of piles on them. And I think you're seeing that with Tucker. You certainly saw that with my father. I mean, my father has more credibility having gone through the Russia hoax, having been impeached once, been impeached twice over the nonsense, having them go after his Supreme Court justices, make up horrible allegations that were totally false, right? Everything he says about the deep state now really kind of resonates true. He was right. He was right that they were spying on his campaign. He was right that there was no Russia collusion and this whole thing was made up by another political party. And in a certain way, it gives you chips. And I think that very same thing has happened with Tucker. He's going to have an awesome future. I think he's going to be a great voice in the Republican Party for a long time to come, and just for conservatives in general. And frankly, for common sense, as I said. It's not even about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about common sense. And
I think that's why your dad got elected. I mean, the common sense that he put forward, and it wasn't, and I remember, because, I'm a policy wonk. I read every single tax policy from every candidate. I mean, no offense against Ted Cruz, but your dad's was better. I think he had a VAT tax in there. I read every single one, every single word, and I was like, wow, this is good. Like, this is good economic policy.
And now you're looking at administration. I can't believe this. There's a great article yesterday about how, the higher your FICO score is, the more interest you should pay on a mortgage. And I'm sitting there saying, Trish, this can't be serious. I mean, so, I pay every single credit card early. I pay my mortgage on time. I do X, Y, and Z, right? I'm perfectly responsible, never miss a bill, never have any kind of default. I have a 800 credit score or whatever it is. You mean to tell me I should be paying more than the person who doesn't pay their credit card? You can't make up this narrative. You're literally going to have people who have perfect credit scores before they refinance their house, default on a credit card on purpose to screw up their credit score, only to get a lower interest rate on their home, only to then pay their. You literally can't.
It's crazy. It's socialist, really, or it's a wealth transfer. It's kind of a tax. Call it what you want, but it's bonkers in terms of the policy. And I hope Republicans can strike that down. I know they're working on it, but it's supposed to start like now. A lot of bad things happening for sure. And I think Americans are hungry for change, and they're going to do a lot to try and suppress your dad. Quickly, just before I let you go, because I always wonder about this, you have a wonderful family. I know your wife, and she's just fantastic. Your whole family, by the way, really, really just a great group of people. What has this been like? And if you could turn back the clock, would you have not gone down the escalator? Would you have not engaged in any of this? Because again, I just think it's tough from a personal perspective. You must have Teflon there, because it's hard to deal with. Eric, what is it like on a personal level?
I'll never forget my father saying when we first jumped into the race, he goes, "We're going to learn who our real friends are quickly." And I think it was maybe the most insightful thing that he ever said. This was in his office 3 days before he went down that escalator, right when he kind of announced to us that he wanted to do this. But he goes, "You're going to find out who your true friends are." And we have. I would have never imagined in a million years the corruption, the nonsense, how they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal, how they're willing to slander a family, how they're willing to go after you when you've lived a perfectly clean, beautiful, innocent life. Thank God, by the way, we had. It's tough as hell, and Trish. And for every single arrow that the public has seen us take, I'm telling you, we've taken 100 behind the scenes that the public hasn't seen. But we love this country. We absolutely love this country. And I'm telling you, I look at the other Republicans that are running right now. These guys wouldn't last in that gunfight for 3 seconds. The other side would bankrupt them.
Why not?
They would destroy them. They couldn't put up the fight. It took a guy like Donald Trump who didn't care, who had everything he needed in life, who had many billions of dollars behind his name, who could afford to fight this nonsense off. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars worth of legal fees fighting nonsense, absolute nonsense. The whole Russia hoax, look how much money we spent on that. Then we find out that Hillary funded the thing. We go and we sue Hillary for it, and the judge sanctions us for suing somebody who bankrolled something that literally took down our nation for 3 years, that destroyed our country, that created divisiveness between the two largest nuclear superpowers in the world. It was proven. The FBI proved it. We went after her. We sued her for this. And guess what? We get sanctioned for it. But it takes a guy like Donald Trump who has backbone and who has the ability monetarily to do this. Any of these other guys, they will break in a second. And that's how they flip them into rhinos. A lot of these people go into government with the greatest intentions in the world. And then the system piles on. But the difference is they don't have Donald Trump's ability to fight against the system. Again, they don't have the money, nor do they have the backbone to do it. And they immediately cave.
And that's a fighter.
And honestly, Chris, that's
you guys are
why
too.
They become different people. And so it's the greatest thing in the world that he did it. My father was the greatest man in the world. I've never been more proud of him. As many arrows as I've personally taken, and Laura's taken, my kids have taken, and Don and Ivanka, and Barron and Melania, and everybody else, I will be the first person by his side. I will fight like hell. And I promise you, Trish, we're gonna beat these guys again. We better, otherwise, I truly believe in my heart of hearts, and I'm not saying this because I'm an alarmist, we will not have a country. So
yeah, no, I mean, a lot at stake. Eric Trump, thank you so much.
Thanks, Trish.
With that in mind, take a look again at Donald Trump this week in Manchester, New Hampshire, a town I know very, very well, New Hampshire. Born and raised, former Miss New Hampshire, by the way. Born and raised in New Hampshire, great place. And they have a very sort of libertarian and conservative in some ways spirit. He got a warm welcome, and he made an important point, especially considering how Joe Biden keeps saying that conservatives want to destroy our country. Apparently, it's somehow offensive. I mean, the idea that the words "Make America Great Again" can somehow be offensive. I mean, that's where we are in society. I mean, think about even when he was running back in 2016 and on college campuses, you'd have kids going nuts because no, we can't have a Trump sign. I'm like, the guy's the Republican nominee for president, for goodness sakes, right? And that was back then. That was before any of the January 6th stuff. So people were already just insanely overboard and unwilling to listen to another point of view. Why? Like, what has happened to society where we get to the point where Dylan Mulvaney is the spokesperson for like everything now and says that people should be sued if you don't use the right pronoun when referring to this transgender? I mean, it's just, it's reaching a tipping point. And I think Americans are going to have something to say about it. All right, turning to some economic news, the Federal Reserve has finally come out with its explainer on why Silicon Valley Bank failed so miserably. Let me quote. According to our government, Silicon Valley Bank was a highly vulnerable firm in ways that both its board of directors and senior management did not fully appreciate. Yeah, duh. Like, these people that ran this bank, they were out there going long on 30-year bonds that were paying like nothing, treasury bonds of like, 1.5%, when everybody knew you were going to have inflation. I mean, the inflation was so obvious. So why were you doing that? Why were you taking on insane amounts of risk? Bad management that, by the way, the Federal Reserve out there in La La Land in San Francisco never bothered to do any due diligence on. So our government, if you ask me, this was a failure of our government, because there are certain like rules and regulations and certain things that you need to do as a bank to continue as a bank so that we don't have bank runs and you don't have a collapse of the system. And yet SVB, they were taking crazy chances and nobody rang the alarm bell. It gets worse because really, investors should have seen through this. Like Wall Street should have seen through this. The analysts that cover the bank, they should have clued in, because apparently, according to the federal government, the review that they came out with said that Silicon Valley Bank, quote, failed its own internal liquidity stress tests. All right, I don't want to use too many big words, but that's sort of a big deal. So like they have all these stress tests that they do at banks where you have to have enough liquidity. In other words, enough cash on hand to be able to pay your bills in the event of a big, big problem, right? So if you are hit with a bank run, can you still manage it? Well, Silicon Valley Bank had its own stress test that it had set up for itself, and it couldn't even pass those. So how did nobody see this one coming? How is it that you had the financial news media, including a guy over at CNBC that I used to work with, touting this stuff, touting the stock 2 weeks before the thing went totally under? I mean, this is just really, really bad. The report goes on. Silicon Valley Bank managed interest rate risks with a focus on short-run profits and protection from potential rate decreases, and removed interest rate hedges rather than managing long-term, long-run risks and the rise of risking rates. I mean, it's crazy. It's almost like Silicon Valley Bank. They could be like the Biden administration. It's like when I sat here and I told you we're going to get inflation, we're going to get inflation, we're going to get inflation. And I've been saying this since August of 2020.
It keeps getting worse and worse.
I said, you cannot have the Fed doing this. And the federal government, by the way, it was Trump back then who gave out the second stimulus check. Oh, well, the Fed just kept printing money. And I'm like, this is not going to end well. It was so obvious to anyone that had just a couple of brain cells. And yet the Biden administration sat there with a straight face, and they came into office and gave a third check, by the way, a third check. You had more stimulus spending from Congress as a whole. That was courtesy of the Democrats. And you had the Federal Reserve working to print even more money. And they all thought that this was transitory. Do you remember that? Transitory inflation. I mean, give me a break, people. You do not need a PhD in economics to be able to figure out that if you print that much money for that long a time period and everybody's sitting home and they're getting checks from the federal government, there's going to be some pent up demand and you're going to have a lot of inflation, which is exactly what we had. And yet these people over at Silicon Valley Bank, they couldn't figure that out. They're supposed to be in charge of the darn bank and managing the risk. And not only that, they didn't even bother to hedge it. What do you think you do? You're running a bank. You don't ever think that maybe, just maybe, there might be some inflation? I mean, did you really believe Joe Biden and Janet Yellen when they sat there and told you it was transitory? I'll tell you, if you did, you were a fool. And these people at Silicon Valley Bank, they were fools, and they're threatening the whole system as a result. Bad stuff. Anyway, don't get, you know, I get worked up about the economy, right? that's just inflation. This is what sort of gets me on fire, and my frustration is off the charts only because it was all so avoidable. This is why policy matters. This is why elections matter, right? We want our economy to do well. We want low inflation. We want strong growth. We want to be able to benefit from that. Listen, I want to take a quick break and do a little commercial for Key City Capital, keycitycapital.com. One of our sponsors, they know there's inflation out there. And if you want to try and find a way to beat this inflation in some way, shape, or form, they say they might be able to help you do that. They have a team over there that's investing in real estate that they believe will offer a sort of steady cash flow value, as well as some capital appreciation over the long term. And so this is their way, they say, of helping to mitigate the inflation that we're likely going to continue seeing, they say, in the foreseeable future. If you're interested in this, go over to keycitycapital.com/Trish. Again, keycitycapital.com/Trish. Check them out. Staying with the theme of investing, and those of you that might be a little worried right now, LegacyPMInvestments.com, you know, they're one of our sponsors. They sell gold and silver now right there on their website online. Imagine that. You can buy and sell it right there at LegacyPMInvestments.com. They've got all kinds of things, from silver coins to gold bars to gold-backed IRAs, by the way, if you want to do something like that. Just reach out to them at 1-866-589-0560 or do it directly yourself online, LegacyPMInvestments.com. And this story just coming into us right now, you know, I was just telling you about how Joe Biden's getting a little up there in age and 70% of Americans don't want him to run. 51% of Democrats don't want him to run, but he's running anyway, by the way. We saw just the other day, he struggles to remember reporters' names. And apparently you got to get your questions cleared over there at the White House. Take a look. This reporter's cue card was right there in Joe Biden's pocket. He knew to call on her and how to pronounce her name because, well, there was a picture and her potential question. Anyway, another story just coming in about Joe Biden. This one, I mean, you cannot make this up. he's claiming that he has 6 grandchildren. He's leaving out his 7th grandchild. That would be the child of Hunter. Are we allowed to talk about that? I don't know these days. You never know what you're allowed to talk about these days. Anyway, he had this whole take your child to work event there at the White House. Very nice to do, by the way. I've done that a lot. I think it's great to show your kids where you work, all that kind of thing. For me right now, it's a little bit easier, but they used to come occasionally to the studio with me. And he took some questions from some of the kids there. And then he kind of struggled with his answer about his own family and said he had 6 grandchildren instead of 7.
One granddaughter lives in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. One granddaughter lives in New York. One granddaughter lives in Washington. One granddaughter lives in Wilmington, Delaware. And the other grandsons, my grandson lives in California. I left somebody out, didn't I? Anyway, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and I did say 5. You're right. So let me see. I got 1 in New York, 2 in Philadelphia. There's 3. No, 3, because I got one granddaughter who is, I don't know.
That's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah.
Ouch. Okay. He left out 1, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'll tell you one guy I will never leave out, never out of any show, and that is my little guy, Fluffy. This is Fluffy. He is not a kid, but he sometimes feels like one. He's the one that never, ever, ever talks back, right? This guy is just so loving and so sweet. And it's why I take his diet very seriously. I feed him Rough Greens, which is a supplement I put on his food every single night. Just sprinkle a little bit on top. And this, I am convinced, is what gives him his energy and his health. We've had some allergy problems with him in the past. This seems to have cured it. He's thriving. And I attribute a lot of that to the success of his diet, specifically Rough Greens. If you would like your free Jumpstart trial, you can try it yourself. Friends of the show get a special offer. Go to roughgreens.com/Trish today and get your free Jumpstart trial. All you have to do is pay for shipping. It'll be at your house in a couple of days, and tell me how your dog likes it. Big show coming up next week. I mentioned Alan Dershowitz. He is on the program on Monday, and he has just taken all kinds of heat from all sides, right? Because he's daring to stick up for the Constitution. Imagine, you stick up for the Constitution, everyone hates you for it. Well, it's just because he's saying that the Constitution is on Donald Trump's side. We're going to get into all of it. I'll continue checking in with you here over the weekend, everyone. Do make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Give it a thumbs up. Share, and I'll see you on Monday.